Hi, and welcome to one of our UMI Makes It Easier events. UMI exists to make it easier for you and your business to do more and go further. And we do that by taking the hard work out of finding and using the best information, expertise, and finance. We've helped over 500,000 businesses do that, so you're in really good company. By the end of this event, you should be leaving with a better understanding and the ability to make decisions and take action much more quickly. So immediately after the event, you'll be sent an action plan to help you apply what you've got out of today, and along with the contacts and tools to get on and do just that. Have a great session. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You'll find our contact information at the bottom of all of our emails, but even easier, why not just go on to the SatNav service via the platform or mobile app and you'll find us there.
So good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Antonia Brindle, and I'm delighted to chair this session this morning, which is on improved decision making with an effective board. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into today's webinar. Please use the live Q&A button on your toolbar if you have any questions to submit, and you can use the discussion forum button to share your thoughts and chat with further delegates online. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Experience Bank, and we have with us Andrew Marsh, who is an experienced non-exec director and chairman who specialises in ensuring board effectiveness. Unfortunately, Peter Neal, founder of the Experience Bank, can't be with us due to personal reasons, but he's asked me to apologise and pass on that if anyone would like a personal meeting, then he'd be more than happy to. Through answering your questions, Andrew will be sharing on how to improve governance, which should increase and protect the economic value of your business. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Antonia. Morning, everybody.
Shall we crack straight onto the questions? I can see a few being paused already.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, let's go for it. Apologies, by the way, my Wi-Fi has been a little bit tricky today, so apologies if it flickers a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So the first question is, what stage would you say is a good time to appoint a NED or a board in a company?
Okay, so the first point to make, that actually upon registration or incorporation, actually every company has a board at that point. We just don't recognise that we have a board at that point. So when you register at Companies House to incorporate your company, you put down a director. You can put one or two directors down, but usually most companies start up with one director, and that effectively is the board. You may not act in the formality of a board, but in the eyes of the Companies Act, that is in effect a board setup. As you evolve the company, as the company grows, it goes from the startup phase into the scale-up phase, and then into a more mature phase. The needs of governance and the needs of that support will change with time, Antonia. So the rounded answer on the question really is there's actually no right time, there's no wrong time either. What actually drives people to put a board together is they want further insights. Yeah, they want further perspectives. They want people to be engaged and a part of that journey. Now, there are some boards that are put together because the company's gone out and got investment, for example, and the investment parties require that you have the formality of a board. So you may have to do a board at that point. If you're in a charity or a third party, the third sector, you automatically need to have a board of structure to ensure the beneficiaries receive the services that are intended through that charity or that third sector. But when you're in an SME or when you're in a limited company, an enterprise company, it's really a choice thing as to when do you do it, and a complexity thing. I always look at them in terms of what complexity are we dealing with, what challenges in the future are we dealing with, but also what type of input do I need to drive forward. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes total sense. We have someone online who's saying that from an SME, saying they're scared of losing control of their business by employing a board. So they're asking what are the benefits and pitfalls, and are there any other alternatives?
Yeah. this is a common thing actually for a lot of entrepreneurs, that they've started their business, it's their baby, it's developed over the years. They know the purpose. They've recruited everybody that's come through the door to a certain degree, etc. So it is a scary time when you go in there. But actually, what you can do is manage that situation. Now, just to be clear, when you appoint a non-executive director, they are fiduciary. So in other words, they are legally responsible for the decision making in the firm. So it's not a case of losing control. It's more a case of you're now joined by somebody else who's got the same legal obligations as you. So it's almost you can almost see it as a little bit of spread the risk, as it were, because they're making those legal decisions and accountability points for you. Yeah. But you can actually still control the decision-making process through things called delegated authority or matters reserved for the board. And then matters reserved for the shareholders. And obviously the founders will be the shareholder in that context. So you can use those tools and techniques to be able to say, look, these are the decisions that as a shareholder, I'm going to retain. Okay. And usual things are things like the equity, taking on investment, diluting the share structures or changing the share structures in any way, amendments to the articles, etc. They can all be reserved to the shareholder. The board then has other types of powers that it can do and things of that nature. But it's very much a case of thinking through the rules and the evolution of what's going to go through is a really important thing. I see where the mistakes happen is people rush to appoint a board because they see somebody else doing it, or it's fresh in the news, or whatever the case may be, and they rush into it and they don't really sit back and think about, okay, how am I going to use this? What benefits is it going to be? But what it does give you, and one of the things you asked there was about benefits and things. Well, the biggest benefits is actually you're going to get more insights. You're going to widen the thinking of what's available to you, especially if you have multiple people, diverse perspectives on that board. You are going to get more insights. You are going to get more energy levels, etc. You also asked about pitfalls. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, just on that point of benefits, there's actually research out there that actually shows having a good board with good perspectives and good structure and good disciplines can actually improve your profitability, does actually improve your revenue and your success rate. And the research out there is developing all of the time, but it is proven that it can do it. Okay. The pitfalls, as I mentioned, if you rush into it and you don't have the structure right, then it becomes a very slow, dragged process, very difficult to get decisions made, etc. And obviously, because you're making them a fiduciary responsible person, if you want to change that board in any way, it becomes a little bit more onerous and a little bit more difficult to do. Okay. Now, there is an alternative to having a non-exec director on a board, which is to start with an advisory board. All right. So here you might look at a particular problem or a particular opportunity, and you've got various skill sets. You might want finance, you might want marketing, you might want legal, for example. You don't really want those people to be legally accountable for what's going on in the firm, but you want to get their insights. So in that context, you can have an advisory board that sits there that advises you on certain things. But here's the thing. People confuse the advisory board and even people who sit on the board confuse what an advisory board is there to do. So sometimes they sit there and they say, you must give me the accounts of the company. You need to give me the information. I'm going to scrutinize the company's performance. That's not what an advisory board does. That is what a non-exec director and a board will do. Scrutiny is absolutely important there. But an advisory board is all about answering specific questions that you as the leader or the company wants to have answered. They may need some information to help qualify the answers and give input, but it's all driven by the question that's required. But the advisory board is a good starting point. It's almost like a try before you buy. Yeah, let's just make sure, can I work with these people? Is the structure right? Is the advice going to be right? And if it is, and you want to structure that in a more formal way, then great, move on into a board.
Fab. That sounds like there's some really strong options there. I guess whether it's an advisory board or a board, it's important to make sure that the board's aligned, that those
Correct.
people are aligned, and that they're clear on the company purpose. So how would you go about ensuring that?
Well, there's a few things actually. So anybody who's aspiring to be a non-exec director or even a trustee, the first thing you've got to remember is your role is there to do what's in the best interests of the company. So it's not in the best interests of Andrew Marsh as the non-exec director. It's the company that I'm sat on the board. I have to do what's right for that company, right? And there are a number of legal obligations that you sign up to as a non-exec director. So that's the first thing you have to think about. And what that really means is you have to leave your ego at the door, right? It also means that you have to really get underneath the skin of what are we trying to achieve within the company. And clearly that comes from being clear about the purpose, having a clear strategy, having a clear business plan, right? I see far too many companies that write plans that are on spreadsheets and have monthly revenue lines and EBITDA numbers and all that sort of stuff. And those are okay targets, but they're not the sense of what's the direction of travel we want to go with. Because if you hold yourself just purely to the numbers part, Antonia, then you lose track of everything else because you're just focused on what the numbers say.
Yeah.
So what you need to do to get alignment is really make sure the board understands, everybody understands the purpose. Why do we create the company? What's the value? What are we trying to create? And then our strategy of how we're exploiting and how we're developing it as we move forwards. They're the real things. But it's like any leadership team, and people miss this point. A board is the most senior leadership team in an organization. So the staff will look at the board, stakeholders will look at the board. Are you doing the right things? Are you making the decisions? Are you acting in the right sort of way? Are you consistent with what you're doing as well? Okay. That requires a lot of communication. It requires people to be consistently listening, understanding, and engaging. And through that, you can make the right calls. You can have an effective board in that way. Where things drop and fall down is when that communication isn't happening and that alignment quite isn't there. Now, that's not to say that boards have to like each other. They have to respect each other, but they don't necessarily have to like each other. But equally, they can have really robust conversations, conflicted conversations, if you like, positive. But it's about how they get to a decision. But once the decision's made, they all have to stand behind it. It's called collective accountability. Okay, so to keep that alignment, it's about that communication. It's about that dialogue. It's about having an open and transparent discussion, but all linked back to the purpose and the strategy that you've started the company with. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. You mentioned making decisions. What kind of decisions should a board be making?
Well, that's going to be different depending on the life cycle. So if you're in an early stage company, startup company, the board's probably going to be making a lot of operational decisions around, probably linked to the cash flow, to be honest. Can we hire that person? Should we be going out now? What investment can we do on our minimal viable product or service or whatever the case may be? But actually, as you progress on, my view is the board's role is about strategy. It's there to, yes, there's a role on scrutiny. Are we delivering on the things that we said we would deliver, the promises that we made, the targets that we've set? Are we delivering on them? But it's actually also about strategy. What's coming? Where are we going? And what do we need to do? So the board's decisions should be around that future. If all the board is doing is making decisions based on the next month, for example, or the next 2 or 3 months, I would question whether or not that board is operational or not. It's probably too operational because it's very short term. All right. Now, you may need that if you're in a cash strap situation, etc. But a board needs to be a longer term cycle, making decisions that are a bit further out, more strategic in nature. So an example might be we want to invest in a new piece of machinery or some new technology, but we're only going to see the revenue results of that in 18 months' time, but we need to make the commitment now. Should we be making that commitment? Can we see, is that the right thing to do? Is there a market opportunity? That could be one of them. Yeah, one of the examples. Equally, you might have decisions in terms of the org structure and the shape that we're going to need to be. So in 2 years' time, we want to be in 3 different markets rather than the current sector we're in now. Okay, so what does that therefore mean in terms of our investment to make us ready to exploit that opportunity? So there's a couple of examples sort of within it. There are lots and lots of different examples as well, Antonia, and I could probably take a half a day to just go through the types of decisions. But keep the balance. Scrutiny, yes. Understanding where the company performance is up to, but strategy and more longer term, medium to longer term is really where the energy should be.
Yeah. So speaking of examples, somebody's asked, what are your current challenges with an existing board? Can you give us an example?
My personal ones. Oh, I've got tons of them. So some examples, some challenges that you're going to have, for example, are, and it sounds very minor, but people's preparation for a board. Yeah. If you've not prepared, if you haven't read papers, if you haven't gone out and socialized with somebody, and you turn up to a board meeting, you're almost in catch-up mode during the meeting. Yeah, you're just getting caught up. That for me is frustrating. That's, if people have shared information and shared material, then bloody read it in advance. Get to know about it. It's my job as a non-exec director and as a chair to make sure I'm ready and prepped, that I understand what's going to happen in that meeting. So that's one frustration I have. And I'm sure we've all got meetings, even in the executive world, where that happens as well. But it's a discipline that starts at the board and goes all the way through. That's one challenge. Another challenge actually is procrastination. Some boards, because at the end of the day, a non-exec director is not in the company all the time. Okay, so they're not going to feel all of the immediate pulse all of the time, etc. But what people sometimes do, and this happens a lot in the third sector actually, Antonia, in charities, is that they want information. They want another bit of information. They want another bit of analysis. They want another bit of data, and there may be no actual extra benefit in that additional data, but it makes them feel good, or it comes from their point of view, and that can be very frustrating when you're trying to make a decision, you're trying to move forwards, and all you get into is that cycle of more data, please, more information, more tables. And can I have the spreadsheet cut that way, and then tomorrow I want it cut that way, and then I'd like it cut that way. It's the same bloody data. It's not telling us anything different, but yet we're expending the executives team in creating that. And then a final frustration for me, and a challenge that I have in particular, is, do we get enough time to talk about the important things? Are there too many little things that get onto the agenda? And I go back to that operational versus strategic type stuff. And that's where a good chair comes into their own, because they're looking at the agenda and going, right, that we're not having that conversation. You need to go away and talk that, but we are going to spend a lot of time on this particular piece. So it's making sure we get enough time to talk. Those are some of my frustrations as we sort of go through, etc. There are some challenges when you have a majority shareholder who is on the board, and maybe the chief exec or maybe the executive director, and they wear all 3 hats in the boardroom. Yeah. It's a big bugbear of mine. You have to remember, your shareholder hat is not in a boardroom. Your board of director hat is on. And if you're an executive as well, so you might be the chief exec as well, then you're reporting as an employee of the company to the board on the performance, and giving rationale and ideas and inputs. So you have to remember what hats you're wearing. And it's very frustrating when all the hats come in, and decision making gets clouded by, well, it's whatever the majority shareholder wants. well, that's not in the best interest of the company.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, that sounds like it has the potential to become pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Are there other early signs of a dysfunctional board when it comes to making decisions?
Yeah. And we've probably all had this when a decision's made, and then some people come out of the boardroom saying, I don't agree, I'm not aligned to that, it's not for me. That's a very obvious sign, Antonia. People's preparedness is another sign, whether they're prepping and getting engaged properly, sort of through that. And actually the type of quality of input that members are bringing to the table. You may not agree with something, but there's ways we can ask questions. We can still be respectful, but if we're starting to be unrespectful of people or opinions, or talking over people, or whatever the case may be, then those are all early signs, of where boards are going wrong. And it's probably remiss, because we are on the 22nd after all. The papers have been full of the OpenAI story. It's probably people have read about it. The board took a decision to remove the CEO, etc. And now they're having to backtrack because all of the staff revolted, and it looks like he's made an agreement to come back and join the board with various other conditions. And you've got to ask the question, what happened? How was it that board couldn't communicate with each other to share the frustrations? Because the reason they gave for removing the CEO was the communication wasn't there, and therefore they couldn't do their duty properly. Right. Well, that's interesting, because surely they must have talked about this collectively, etc. But here's the bit that I've learned by watching some of the stuff in the press. There are 6 people on that board, and not one of them had any board experience before they joined the board. So you've now got very inexperienced people trying to lead an organization. They may be very clever, and 3 of them were the founders, of the organization, but the non-execs had never really been non-execs before. So probably didn't understand the role before. So when we started, what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls are you pick the wrong people. But actually, those individuals that were non-execs had power because of the way the articles were created to make decisions, right? So one of the rules under the articles, for example, is called quorum. Are we quorum as a group? And it will say quorum means how many people need to be present in order for a board meeting to be composite. In normal model articles, when you start the company, it will say 1 director. Most organizations get to 2, maybe 3 as a minimum. Well, if I've got 3 people present and they're all on the board, and I might be on a train, by the way, or I might be in a cafe, or I might be whatever, that could be classed as a board meeting. And if I make a decision, that could be a decision that's enforceable. So again, it's about the rules and understanding those things. But the OpenAI is just a classic example of where it was just not a functioning board.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the greatest challenges of setting up a new board, or ensuring that your existing board is being effective. Do you have any hints and tips for people on getting that right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of techniques actually. So the first technique is, what are my worry points, right? And this is called wargaming as a technique. People might have seen it in leadership. But it's used by the military, hence why it's called wargaming. But principally, what you do is you put yourself a year forwards, right? I've now established the board, and the board has been put in place. And what you say is, in 1 year, I'm now stood in what are we now? November. I'm now in November 2024. This last year has been the worst effing experience of my life. Everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. We've fallen out, we've lost revenue, we've lost clients, we did all sorts, the board wasn't dynamic enough, etc., etc. And if you articulate in that way, and you say, well, what went wrong? So now you're listing out. Some people out there might be going, no, this is just a risk register. It sort of is and it isn't, right? But what you're listing out are all the things that it could go wrong, right? So one of it might be, we weren't clear enough on the powers, or the strategy wasn't clear enough, etc. So as a result, you can then take mitigating actions and build them into your plans, not just on a risk register. So if that wargaming technique tells you that we got it wrong because we weren't clear on the goals, well, guess what? The board's first action is to be very, very clear on the goals before you even start. And therefore, by mitigating all of those risks, that negative year can't happen because you've solved them all. You know, if we had the decision-making rules wrong, well, get the delegated authority and the stuff clear. So it is clear and it is accountable. So that's the first technique. Okay. The second technique is many people recruit people for the board and the need of the company today. Wrong.
Yeah.
You have to recruit based on the next 18 months, 2 years, the challenges that you believe you're going to be facing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So be thinking clear. So if you're in an exit process, you probably want somebody with you on the board that's gone through an exit process, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be finance. It can be any type. Equally, if you want to expand and go into America, you probably want somebody who's got experience of international market development, etc. If you, she agrees wholeheartedly, and various other things. So they're the two techniques: the wargaming principle and thinking about 18 months, 2 year, 3 year challenges. What do I need, and how do I bring it in? Because those future challenges, you may need to be doing things now to be ready for them. Yeah. I'll let you feed the dog.
I'm just going to give her a treat to keep her quiet. Apologies for that. Best laid plans.
That's all right.
No, that
you've got to keep. You've also got to keep the board fed and watered. I'm telling you, that's a good lesson.
Yes, I've just learned. Yeah. So that's all been brilliant, Andrew. Thank you. I think if we just close up with a final question of what evidence exists that boards help with that improved decision making?
There are various papers I can send. If it helps, I can send a couple of things around. There's lots of evidence. There's actually one big piece of evidence which shows that if you've got a board, its impact over a cycle starts to diminish over time. And the reason for it, and it's roughly about 9 years, okay, in totality. And the reason for that is you become too institutionalized. You start to just accept things as the state, that's just what we do. That's how we go through. So there are some charts and there are some evidence things that I'm quite happy to share around, Antonio, if that's of interest to people. But there's lots of research there. The IOD, the Institute of Directors, has got lots of white papers and evidence out there on that sort of stuff. You've got something called the Quoted Companies Association. So this is for firms that are looking to maybe float or go into the AIM market, etc. They've got lots of research, and then you can look at some of the places like Cranfield, Open University. They've got lots of papers and research that show the real sort of evidence sort of around it. My take on it is the evidence is good because it shows that when you get it right, it can work, but it's all about context. See, so those numbers only are relevant in your context if you get it right. If you really think and plan it properly, you'll get it right. So you might get ahead of the curve or you might just hit the curve, but it's the context upon which you're in. That's where the real value comes. But there is research out there and I'm happy to share some.
That's brilliant. Well, that sounds like a great place to end. Hopefully the people online or who are watching this will now all feel a burning need to improve their board effectiveness. If you do, please do get in touch with the Experience Bank. Thank you, Andrew, for today.
Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. You will receive an email from Umi with a link to an event survey. Please do let us know how you think today went.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.